So I think a lot of you may have heard of me or seen me. I emceed the conference here yesterday. But for those that don't know, what's my background? I'm currently a regional coordinator for Vermont Emergency Management. So in the southern half of the state, I assist towns and organizations with planning, training, and exercising for emergencies, as well as coordinating disaster response. In that role, I've been fortunate enough to assist the town of Killington with preparations for the Audi FIS World Cup. And I'll talk a lot about that throughout this presentation. I was able to assist the town of Johnson with preparations for the 2018 legalization celebration, which was a party to celebrate the legalization of marijuana on July 1st of 2018. And through emergency management, but also another hat that I wear, I assisted the town of Dummerston with planning for the 2020 Tour de Heifer, which is a charity bike ride put on by the organization that runs the Strolling of the Heifers. I've got 18 years in fire and EMS response. I'm currently the assistant fire chief for the West Dummerston Fire Department. And I also spent 9 years on the state's hazmat team, coordinating hazmat issues. So today we're going to actually talk about, what are some of the event emergencies that could happen? What do they mean for us? And we'll talk about who can help us plan for the worst. And a lot of you as local EMDs may know some of this, but we'll get into what can each group kind of bring to the table. And we're going to touch at the very end a little bit on developing a plan. If you've attended the conference in years past, you may have seen Glenn Herron talk about planning and different ways you can plan, developing a sync matrix, developing checklists, things like that. That's all those tips and tricks are what's relevant here. So it's really like developing an annex for your LEMP, but you're doing it for a special event. So I want you all to think about the events you've planned or attended. It could be a small group retreat, a large brew fest, rallies, bike rides, things like that. I want you to think about the times you have had to rely or seen a use of emergency services for these events. Think about the times that you may have had to cancel an event due to an extenuating circumstance. The first one that comes to mind, honestly, is COVID. How many times have we canceled things because of COVID-19, or we've moved them virtually? So when you hear the term event emergencies, what comes to mind? And you can feel free to pop into the chat and just kind of say some of the things that you think of. I'll give you a minute. Fairs, yes, fairs. How many of our towns have, a small little fair in the fall or the summer, something along those lines? Yep. Graduations, absolutely, another great example. Especially this year was so weird. We did graduation parades and drive-in graduations. Parades, yes, absolutely. Parades come to mind. 4th of July being the big one. I'm down in the Brattleboro area, so I always think Strolling of the Heifers. Marathons. Oh, yep, absolutely. Concerts on the green. Absolutely. These are all events that we have to plan for. Fire schools. Oh, that's a good one. I didn't even think of that one. Yeah, you're bringing a region or the state emergency responders to one location. You could have a problem there. Absolutely. So I think that's a good list. Those are some great ones. Some I'd never even thought of. So awesome. What I kind of came up with, and I really broke them down into the event emergencies. I broke into really 4 categories. You have medical emergencies. Somebody has a health issue, an allergic reaction. The more common one is like a slip, trip, and fall. So you're at a conference facility and you have wires taped down across the road. Somebody does a slip, trip. Those sorts of emergencies happen at events. And we kind of deal with them. Weather. How many people know what the biggest hazard, the biggest threat we face in Vermont from weather? For those that don't know, Oh, I see water. Yep. It's a form of water. It's called flooding. Flooding's our biggest disaster here in the state. So that causes a lot of damage. So we do have outside things that impact that. So rain, wind, tornadoes. Believe it or not, we have tornadoes here. The last one occurred the summer of 2019, so a little over a year ago. It was an EF1, and it actually went through the town of Windham, Vermont. Outside influence. So those could be road closures, power outages, something nearby your event that is threatening your event or could cause a delay. A great example, and I mean, I hate to say it, but this morning, I woke up, we lost our power sometime over the night, but it was back on. And my wife turned to me and said, "Hey, what if our daughter's school doesn't have power?" I said, "I didn't know that." So I looked. There was no power in all of downtown Brattleboro this morning. And actually, several portions of the state have power outages. We had a event we planned. I helped work with at Vermont Emergency Management. We were at a resort. We were running a several-day workshop, and we were maybe into introductions, and the power went out. No backup power, no lights came on. Our presenter, top tier, awesome, knew her presentation inside and out, so we were able to do it without a PowerPoint or a computer. But just think about that. You've planned an event, you've planned a fire school, you've done something, and all of a sudden power goes out. Do you have a contingency or a backup? The one that we don't really like to think of as far as an event emergency are the bad actors. Look at things like Las Vegas with the concert or the nightclub shootings we've seen. Terrorism, mass shootings, bomb threats, those are all bad actor events that we need to be prepared for. When the town manager in Killington approached and said, "Hey, we want some planning help," one of the concerns they had was the bad actor. The Audi FIS World Cup happens on Thanksgiving weekend. It won't be happening this year, unfortunately. But it brings 25,000 all the way up to sometimes 40,000 people over the course of a weekend to Killington. And while for a ski resort, 25,000 people on a weekend is a busy weekend, 25,000 people crammed into the base of one base lodge or the bottom of one trail, watching a bunch of professional athletes being streamed live on ESPN and all over the world, it kind of puts you on the world stage. So there's a concern that there could be some bad actors, and we have to create some plans around that. So we have a baseline of the events. We have a baseline of the emergencies we want to plan for. And we need to determine who's going to help us prepare. All of you as emergency management directors may be good at planning, but this event comes to town and they don't know who to talk to. So who else do we want to rope in with us? So you can think about this. Just pick one of the scenarios we were just talking about, whether it's the bad actor, the weather, outside influence, or a medical emergency. And think about who would you need to call if that happened at an event you were working. You can go ahead and put that answer in the chat. Public Works departments. Yep, absolutely. Public Works is kind of the, we always think of first responders as fire, police, and EMS, but Public Works are right up there. EMS, yep. Fire, police, and rescue, absolutely. Transportation. Yeah, our partners at the Agency of Transportation are huge partners to us in disaster emergencies. Okay, we got a few. Local ERs, emergency rooms, or doctor's offices. Yeah, that's a great one to include. So here's kind of a list that I came up with, and I broke it down into different agencies. So local fire department. Your local fire department is absolutely a huge resource. Same with the rescue squad or ambulance. And I call that out separately because a lot of our towns, we might have a fire department. They might do medical first response. So if somebody says, "Oh, we have a medical emergency, we're going to call the fire department." Well, yes, but you also need to coordinate with the ambulance. Or, "Oh, we talked to the ambulance in the next town over. They're going to cover our event." Oh, did you talk to first response? Local law enforcement, county sheriff, Vermont State Police. Again, law enforcement, absolutely want to coordinate with them. Town select board or governing body. You know, that's something where as a town emergency management director, you work for and with your select board. They may want to have a seat at the table in planning some of these events. They may have some concerns about constituents. If you remember, if you take any of the ICS classes, G191, 402, we always talk about the elected and appointed officials. That's your town select board. Keep them in the loop. They may want to know. They're gonna be the one getting the call from the angry citizen that because you put 500 bikers on their road during a charity bike ride. And the National Weather Service is a huge, huge partner. I'll get into a little bit, tiny bit about what they do, because our next presentation is Scott Whittier from the National Weather Service. Scott can talk about the services that they offer and how they can help you with their, I think it's a decision support service, DSS. He will talk to you about that. So fire, police, and EMS, what are some of the things that we need to do when we approach them with an event? Do they have the right resources for that event? I was talking about the Tour de Heifer, and when the fire chief, myself, the select board, and the ambulance squad met with the planners, they said, oh yeah, these are the routes we're going to take. Here's the map. And we looked and said, so you have about a mile stretch where you're on this bike trail with no road access. Yep, that's right. What if somebody falls down in the middle of this? You guys can go pick them up. Well, our trucks won't make it. We don't have a four-wheeler. Our department doesn't have a four-wheeler. So maybe we need to call mutual aid, but this is the stuff that we need to know so we can plan for it. The other concern fire, police, and EMS might have is personnel. Let's face it. I don't know a ton of departments that are saying, I have more personnel than I know what to do with. My town, on a weekend, if it's a nice weekend, I might be out with my kids. A lot of our folks are out with their kids. We may not be in town. So giving them a heads up early that, hey, you have this event over the next weekend, or 3 months from now, it's on this weekend, start booking it. Make sure you're not going anywhere. We have people in town. What needs would they have of an event coordinator? If you're running a charity ride in town, or you're running a marathon or half marathon, a road race, whatever the event may be, do local emergency responders know how to get in touch with the people that are in charge of the event? Do the people in charge of the event know how to get a hold of the fire chief to say, hey, that stretch of road that you're concerned about where all the bikers were going, everyone's cleared from that road, so you're good now. You can stand down your off-road equipment. If you're using radio frequencies, what are you using and how are you communicating? Also, access to the venue. Going back to the Killington example, one of the things that we discussed is we have Mountain Ops, which runs the mountain. They have their radio frequencies. We had Vermont State Police. They have their radios. We had local fire that had their radios, and I think it was regional ambulance had theirs. They all have different frequencies and they can't talk to one another. So what we did is we created teams where you would have Mountain Ops doing their thing, and then State Police, National Guard, and maybe an EMS or local security or someone together doing their out in their pod. And if that happened, they had a command post they could call back to, and everyone had the same, was sharing frequencies, and there was a rep from every organization that could talk. So if Mountain Ops had somebody climbing up the side of the mountain, they could call down to the command post. Command post would talk, the person there would talk to State Police, who would send one of their teams up to handle that issue. So it was all about radio frequency coordination and making sure everyone knew. Mountain Ops also let State Police and a few others use some of their radios to say, okay, we're going to be on this channel and this channel. Access to the venue is another very, very important one. If you are familiar with Killington, it's a one long winding road, and if you have to get people in or out, what's your evacuation plan? How are you evacuating people if emergency responders are coming in? So they actually developed a very good evacuation plan, and what they did and how they did it, and they put it on signs, they told people, they made announcements, they had maps printed. It was really a great job. And as emergency responders and EMDs, what do you need from the planners? Or what do the planners need from you? Maybe inspections. You might help coordinate inspections. Now, Division of Fire Safety does a lot of the fire safety inspections, but you may want to know and have access to or have input into their planning process. Do they need you to stand by? And do you have the right resources standing by? And do you have input into the emergency plan? If they're planning for, 50 people and they think they need one ambulance with 2 basic EMTs standing by, can you support that one, or do you have more needs or more that you would put? Maybe you'd want to put a paramedic on site. For town government and emergency management, the event coordinator needs to make sure, do they have the right permits? You might be running a charity ride in one town and there's no permit needed, but you go to a different town, there's a permit required for that. Are there concerns with local residents? So depending on what roads you're using, are you letting the residents know ahead of time? Do certain residents have complaints about traffic on some roads? Are some roads not safe to use? Would you want to open your local EOC for broader coordination? Maybe you just want to have your EOC open, so if they need the highway department, the fire department, law enforcement, or there's a problem and you need to manage it, you want to have your EOC stood by ready to go. And does the state of Vermont need to be involved? And by state, you could have a whole smattering of entities. When we did the Killington planning, we actually pulled together, I want to say close to 60 people to help run through the event and some of the concerns. We brought in the state police. We brought in Agency of Transportation. Again, you're trying to get to Killington Thanksgiving weekend when it's probably snowing, you have your choice of Route 4 and Route 100. That's about it. Do you need some help from emergency management? And we can help pull some of these together. That's part of what I do at Vermont Emergency Management, pull these groups together to say, how can we plan for this event? National Weather Service, I talked about, and you can see one of the products of the Decision Support Service. And this was for the Killington World Cup last year. And you can see where they said, all right, for this range of time, here's the forecasted weather and the winds, and here's what you should be concerned about. Other groups to bring in: contract security, if you're running a big event, transportation, emergency management, and fire safety. And Scott's going to talk more about national weather in just a bit. So now that we know what emergencies could happen, we also know our potential planning partners and who's going to come to the table and help us. How do we put it together? So ideally, you want to form a planning team. Someone from the event planners, 1, 2, or 3 people representing emergency services. You don't have to have the entire fire department there. The chief or his or her designee is fine. If they run first response, they can liaise directly with the ambulance squad. Either yourself as an emergency management director or someone from town government would be a great person to bring in, so you can talk about those local concerns with residents. Oh, I completely forgot one of the local concerns. When we were working on the Tour de Heifer, they said, can you wait to grade the road until after the bike ride? I'm not a bicyclist. I don't know these things. But one of the reasons that is important is because you don't want loose gravel on road bikes. So that was one of the requests of the town government. So bringing in your highway department or someone from town government to coordinate with the highway department. And bring in the weather service. You don't have to bring them in at that first meeting. And then Scott will tell you the whole process, but bring them in so they understand the scope and what's happening. Your core group does the plan writing, and they can write the plan, and they're small. You're going to be working together, but you don't have to have 60 people do this. Once you have the plan, then you can bring a lot more people in. When you're looking at all the threats and hazards, we listed a bunch. Take a look at what are the biggest ones that you have. A car accident. If you're running a bike ride, a car accident is probably a high risk for you. Zombie apocalypse, biblical consequences. It's a low risk. I mean, come on. We've made it through COVID-19. We've made it through Ebola. We've made it through swine flu. We haven't had a zombie apocalypse yet. Doesn't mean it couldn't happen, but it's probably not going to. So take a look at that. And for your event, or for whatever event you're working on, conduct a risk analysis. What are the threats? What are the hazards that that event faces? And if that happened, what are the consequences of it? You do not have to plan for every scenario. Take those top ones in red there, the ones that are in yellow, plan for those. Some of them you might be able to plan for. If you have a high hazard of slip, trips, and falls and medical emergencies, well, those are both medical. Do you need two separate medical plans? No, you can have one medical plan. So determine your goals. What are the hazards you're planning for? So go through that process, that decision matrix that we just looked at. What are the hazards you're planning for, and what are the limits of the planning or the limits of your capabilities? Meaning, we want to plan for that zombie apocalypse. Okay, well, do you know how you're going to plan for it? No. Do you have any expertise in it? Well, I watched The Walking Dead. Okay, that's a limit. You don't have the experience to talk about it. If it's truly something you want to plan for, bring in a subject matter expert. And just point out, that is the Strolling of the Heifers. I took that a couple years ago. I don't know if you can see my mouse, but oh, go back. That little guy right there in the orange hat is my son, my niece. Great time. So plan development. Planning workshops generate good plans. It should go without saying. If you come together, you work together, and you talk about these plans, you're going to have a pretty good plan that people are bought into. And choose a format that suits the plan that you are looking for. You don't have to create the epistle to the Ephesians. You don't have to create an 80-page plan for your town fair. Pick something that works and is actually going to be usable. You're going to put some time and effort into this. You want people to use it if they need it. You don't want it sitting on a shelf. So some of the formats we have, checklist, very simple. Decision support matrix, a sync matrix, probably one of my favorite. An incident briefing, again, another one of my favorites. I really like the format on that. And then a formal written plan. I'm not going to go into all the details on these. So if you are looking at more info, you want to know more about these, you can reach out to me. You can reach out to Glenn Herron at Emergency Management. We have a whole planning class. Honestly, it takes about an hour, maybe two, to go through and walk you through these and help you build plans for your annexes. And we can describe all of those in that. But I want to show you the incident briefing because I think it's one of the ones that a lot of you are going to be familiar with, and it's going to be the easiest one to gravitate to. And so an incident briefing is basically ICS 201. You're putting your objectives on there. What are the activities you're doing, the actions? What organizations are represented in the response phase, and what resources you have available to you or staged or whatnot. So I talked about the legalization celebration. It happened on July 1, 2018. And if you have lived in Vermont for more than 5 minutes, you know in July it gets hot. And this was one of those days. So we put together basically an incident briefing form for this event. We put it together ahead of time. So you can see on page 1, which is on the, I think it's the left-hand side for all of you. The legalization celebration being held July 1, Willowbrook Farm in Johnson. Event is expected to draw hundreds of attendees, yet no more than 2,000. Camping is provided nights of June 30 to July 1. Largest threat for this event is the forecasted weather. High daytime temperatures are forecast to be in the mid-90s, with heat indices expected in the mid-100s. Right there, that situation summary, the bottom of page 1 tells you everything you need to know. What are we concerned with? A lot of people for a couple of days in a field where it's going to be hot. Plain and simple. That's what we're concerned with. So we came up with some objectives. Emergency Management Director will coordinate with National Weather Service, provide event organizers with health and safety information, specifically on weather and heat advisories. So again, going back to your role as EMD, you've connected with the event organizer, you connected with weather service, you're that bridge between the two of them. Sheriff's Department is coordinating with security and event organizers to ensure health and safety of attendees at the celebration. The Sheriff's Department had a mobile command post nearby to relay information to fire, the ambulance, and emergency management event coordinators as needed. Some of the plans or things we came up with for this: water and ice. How are we going to do that? The event organizers were great. They said, well, we got a bus coming from Burlington, makes a trip every hour. So every time we go back to Burlington, we'll just load up with more ice and bring it down. That way they have ice on site to cool people down. The other thing that we were concerned about was, as we all know, July, high heat, high humidity, chance for pop-up thunderstorms. Wasn't a huge risk, but we did want to take that that caution. And so we connected with a church that was nearby that had a basement. And if we needed to, there was a thunderstorm that popped up, we needed to relocate people, we could have walked them over ahead of the thunderstorm. And that's why the National Weather Service is so integral, because they were able to connect that with us. So very small response structure, because we really only had just a few resources. So, in charge at the command post was the Sheriff's Department. We had a liaison officer who was really the person, the event coordinator. And then we had myself, I was a watch officer that weekend. We had the National Weather Service, Scott Whittier. We had the Emergency Management Director, and we had the Town Public Information Officer. And then the incident briefing for resources, we just listed what did we have on standby. We had a mobile command post with 4 law enforcement officers and an ambulance. And that was it. I don't know if you can see my pointer, and that's over here on the right side of my screen. And we just listed, here's what we have and here's what stage. If something happens and we need to scale up response, we can list more resources. We can blow out that incident command structure. So we really have a lot of stuff available to us. We also had a medical plan, which talked about where the location is with medical tent, what security frequencies and radios they were on. We had who was our ambulance service, where were they, how do we get a hold of them, where was the closest hospital, and how long does it take to get there. And we also had a map that we attached to the back of it so people knew where this was. So that's your incident briefing form. I really like that. I think for a lot of us, we can relate. We've seen the ICS forms before, so this will work for us. And if you want help with this, myself and other staff at VEM are more than happy to help you with something like this. Given the pandemic, we may not come up and sit in your town office to do this. We may do it over Microsoft Teams or Skype or something like that, but we will help you put this together. So planned maintenance, and the Killington example is another just awesome example for planned maintenance. So you go through, you develop this plan in your planning team of a couple of people, present it to those who are responding, have the chief bring it to the fire department, meet with the event organizers, have their staff know, make sure everyone has bought into it and understands their role, distribute the checklist. After the event, sit down, how'd it go? Could we do this better next time? What are some of the strengths? What are some of the areas for improvement? Johnson took what we put together for the legalization celebration and applied it to, I think they had a fair day later in the summer. They applied it to that. So they actually used that template and applied it to a later event. Killington, after the event, solicits feedback from all the people that were a part of the event and said, how did it go? What do you think could be improved for next year? And so here we are in, technically it's still September. If we were to hold that event this year, we would be having a planning meeting in the next couple of weeks to talk about what did we like last year? What did we want to do different? Let's make sure we got some new players here, make sure everyone knows the plan that we've developed. And every year they pull that out. I've been a part of those meetings the last few years. It's super easy. I walk in, the guy in charge of the mountain has everything all laid out. Audi FIS is there, Mountain, State Police, National Guard. the whole, AOT, everyone is there. Everyone's bought in like, oh yeah, we did this last year. Let's great reminder. Here's the evacuation route. Here's what we've learned. So plan maintenance is very important if you're going to do this every year. So just as an example, we're going to skip 2020. We're going to pretend 2020 doesn't exist anymore. We're in 2021, all right? We have a vaccine, we don't have a vaccine, it got magically better. We've decided in our town, and by our town I mean all of your towns is going to host a charity bike ride, carnival, and craft fair spanning 3 days in October. So as an example, I would say probably in March, start reaching out to develop a core planning group. Identify your top hazards and what you want the outcomes to be. What sort of plans do you want? You have some time. So it doesn't need to be, hard and fast for a week. It's, all right, we're starting in March. Let's talk about this. We'll meet once every other week or so, maybe once a month. In May, develop your draft plans. In July, bring them to your select board. Bring them to your other groups and have them have input into the plans. Review all of this in August, update the plans. Maybe once you have the updates, you pull together a workshop. You bring in your town government, your state agencies that are needed. You bring in your fire department, your ambulance squad, whoever, the event organizers, and you have a plan workshop. Go through, here's the plan, here's what we do. Hey, if we have to evacuate due to a hazmat spill a mile up the road with wind blowing it this way, what do we need to know? If there's a windstorm the night before, what do we need to know? How do we do this? If we need to evacuate, what's our evacuation route? Talk through all of that. And let's pretend it's October, your event happens, and it goes off without a hitch. It went great. That doesn't mean you end. November, review your event. Pull together your constituents. Pull together the different groups. It doesn't need to be the whole 60, 80 people that were at the workshop, but reps from each agency. Pull them together and say, hey, how do we do? What are the things we want to do? The event went so well, we want to do it in 2022. What do we need to do to improve to make sure we have another successful year? And that's really all this is about, is making sure that whatever event somebody approaches you about or you're trying to organize, you can really get a grip on and have a good, successful, and safe event. So with that, that's my information. Again, Rich Cogliano, that's my cell phone. It's right here. So if you need to get a hold of me, feel free. My email is there, our 800 number. We still answer it every day. Feel free to call with any questions about this, especially as we're going into spring and summer and fall of next year. We may be at a spot where we can have some of these events again. So getting started early and identifying what you want to have happen as a safe outcome, please, by all means, reach out and we're more than happy to help you. With that, oh, go ahead, Emily. I'll take questions.
No, I was just going to say thank you so much, Rich, for providing us with that excellent presentation on emergency planning for special events. As Rich said, our office, Vermont Emergency Management, does have staff that are available to support you. So if you don't happen to live in southern Vermont and be one of Rich's towns, you can always call our 1-800 number to get support from one of our other regional coordinators.